So we're back. Well, I say we're back, but I'm back because I'm waiting on Erin because she is not back. Mhm. Um, where is she? She's beautifying herself for the camera, taking her sweet time. On top of that, um, this has been kind of a crazy day. The power went out earlier, right in the middle of a board meeting. So that was awesome. And now the um, smoke detector keeps beeping, and we have a fix, but we have not been able to run that fix until, well, we won't be able to run that fix until after the meeting has concluded.
That I was late to. I'm so sorry.
Because clearly you hate me more than anything else in this or any other world.
Yes, that's it.
I
You
knew it.
figured me out.
I knew it. Um, but I was telling everyone that you were fixing your hair because you're a girl and girls
I
spend
know.
time in the bathroom.
I was trying to. I didn't finish what I wanted to finish, so it doesn't feel great, but I hate leaving my head wet after the shower. Not only do I feel cold and like yucky, but my hair, if I don't blow dry it, becomes this weird curly mess. And then like the only way to undo that mess is to get it wet again. So it behaves better if I blow dry it right away. So I tried to like halfway blow dry it, but then I was feeling the time crunch. So I just sort of abandoned the whole issue. Now it's just kind of a frizzy, half wet mess.
So wait, you're telling me that you spent all of that time and you still didn't get your hair done?
No,
Why would you do this to me? Again, further evidence for the hatred of all of the multiverse me's.
no, no. You're my favorite.
Um, okay. So, um, we have been talking about time management and administration a lot. Um, we got an article coming out this week that's going to talk about why people should have meetings.
A really good article.
I hope so. I changed it up a little bit in terms of the process. Uh, I don't know if it's any better, um, but it is what it is. We'll check it out. We'll see if anybody likes it.
Yeah.
Um, but the thing is, um, I've tried having meetings for a long time, and everyone says that they don't want to go to meetings because they're like they shouldn't have been invited. There's no point. I actually love being on meetings because if for no other reason than I get informed on, decisions that are made. And as an analyst, I want to know what our targets are. Because if I don't know what we're aiming at, how do we measure it? Right? How are we weighing our decisions? What did I say to you at lunch was something like the basic process for decisions is first off, you have to decide, well, like what is the outcome that we want? What are the alternatives? How do we weight those alternatives? And are we just assigning like a number score? And if we have a number score, is that number based on anything real? And then compute because that's ultimately what is a decision. It's a multiple choice test,
Yeah.
right? And so you need to know what are our options and how are we going to know which option is the best. The reason most people struggle with decisions is that they don't clearly understand what it is that they want out of the deal. They
Yep.
don't know what their options are. And once they know what their options are, they don't know how to elevate one alternative over another. And people will put together like a list of pros and cons for something. But one of the things I learned from you is people who struggle to make decisions will make a pro and con list, but it's like for every pro or con, they add its opposite. So what happens is, you know, if you are, well, I mean, on one level, I'm like, oh, you're so non-judgmental. But at the same time, a decision is a judgment. And if you can't make a decision, then you can't make any judgments about what action is better or worse, which means if you can't make a better or worse decision, all alternatives look equally viable when empirically they might not be,
Totally.
right? And it's like,
Yeah.
you know, well, shit, if you can't decide, you might as well just flip a coin, which is an unfortunate reality for, I think, how a lot of people live and why they don't operate from a place of strategy. One of the things we've been talking a lot about is the difference. Oh, you know what? That's a great place to jump in. The difference between um, principles versus rules,
Oh, yep.
right?
Yep.
And we had this conversation in our Kid Connect on Friday. And, you know, our young Wyrm, um, both by the way, both boys have now graduated to being dragons, and so our youngest is now a worm, um, not
Mhm.
as in like an earthworm or like a nightcrawler, but he is a Wyrm, Wyrm, which is a basically a slithering dragon, like a basilisk, if you will. And then the eldest is a drake. So he is a four-legged dragon with no wings. So neither of them are winged at this particular point.
But the
Um,
path.
but one slithers and the other walks. And so the worm, our worm child, um, brought brought up this um, you know frustration with his journaling because I basically said like, dude, every time you give me journals, because one of his journal entries or his journal assignment every week is to write down thoughts, feelings, and actions, in the beginning of the day, middle of the day, and the end of the day. And so he doesn't have to write them all at like as he's going throughout his day, but he could. I actually tried to keep the assignment very open ended, and that's what started all this. Is that he really struggles with open ended questions. He can handle close ended questions just fine because when he's given specific options, he can generally choose between those options, right? But he struggles when the assignment is open ended. It's too much, and so he doesn't like to think that hard. And so at the same time, he was like, I said, okay, well, look, man, you've just written all of these things, and it's like I'm hungry this morning, and it's like, okay, I was kind of tired after school, or what are we going to do in PE class? So I was like, bro, is this all you think about in the day?
You're like, what
And
else is going on in there?
and he's like, well, no. And I was like, so why didn't you write anything else down? And he's like, well, because, and his excuse has been like, well, I want it, like, I'm trying to follow your format. And I was like, I gave you the format as sort of guidelines to help you as training wheels, but like, you know, and then I showed him one of my reflections and I said, this is what I came up with this morning. And I was, you know, writing, oh my God, what was my reflection that I showed him? Do you remember?
Oh my God. I don't specifically, but I feel like it was you were on the path to understanding like marketing.
Oh,
So I feel like it had something to do with like how people think or how to talk to people or something.
you know what it was? It was feature prioritization.
Oh my God.
So here I am, in the shower thinking thoughts, and then I, get out of the shower. Sometimes, okay, I'm bad. Like sometimes I'll be in the shower and I'll take my phone and I'll be listening to an audiobook. And you did that, you got me that speaker, that like waterproof speaker, so I can
Yeah.
listen to my audiobook in the shower.
Mhm.
Yeah, that's the nerd level that I'm at, y'all, is that I'm like reading books in the shower.
That's
Um,
okay. Clearly, I'm like, let me help you out with this.
right? And so, I'll be like, oh, snap, I got to record this idea, so I'll pause my little audiobook and then I'll grab, and by the way, I've got an OtterBox on my phone. So like that bitch is waterproof. So I've got like
It
my
goes where you
phone
go.
and I'm like, I'll dry off my fingertips so that I can type out my notes to my book that I'm reading. Um,
That's
you know,
great. That's
and so
great.
I was just writing MSC. Again, I like to make acronyms for goddamn everything. But it's must, should, could, to determine, what's the functionality versus the performance versus the delighting factors in your product.
Mhm.
So, I'm thinking about this, product management thing, and I showed him what I wrote down for that. And he was just like, I felt hungry. And I was like, bro, did you have any thoughts that were more advanced than, hungry and volleyball? And he's like, yes. And I said, so why didn't you write them down? And he's like, I don't know. And then I stopped and I waited. And he does this thing where he'll just sit and not look at you and he'll wait. And so I just sat and I waited and he waited. And then he
We
turns
all
and
waited.
we all waited and he turns and he looks at me and he's like, am I missing something? And I said, yeah. And he said, well, I don't know. And I said, okay. And then I waited and then we waited. And I said, what does I don't know mean? I don't know means not is not a trigger to stop thinking. It's a trigger to start thinking. He's like, well, I was thinking. And I was like, do you want to think out loud so that we can have a discussion about these thoughts? And he's like, okay. And so then he finally starts to share some of his thoughts. Now, again, this is one of those weird things, right? Is okay, we're having these thoughts, but he, again, is very reserved about what he is willing to share. And I do think that there's like a face saving behavior there. Like he doesn't want to say something and then get judged. And that's what we ended up getting to, is that he didn't want to be judged. And he feels like, he's doing these assignments, but he's being judged more. And I said, bro, you leveled up. And when you level up in a video game, the bad guys get harder,
Right? The
right?
challenges increase.
Yeah. So it's not like you did anything wrong. As a matter of fact, you did something right. You did it right so much that now you have a new suite of problems to engage with.
Woo!
Woo! Right?
Yay!
And so the better you get, the better you better get. So that's the thing, and that's also one of the reasons why I think most people stop leveling up, is because they realize that things get harder when you increase your skill level, or things get boring. And so we had a conversation about flow state, which we'll get into later. But the whole idea about this was, getting somebody to write things down, and he was realizing, that he was judging, or well, he was like, well, I'm afraid that you're going to get mad at me if I don't do this assignment well. And it's like, I'm not getting mad at you. I'm literally just telling you, here's what the target was, and did you get it or not? Like, if you didn't get it, okay, then I'm going to ask you why. And if you tell me why, and I can troubleshoot that, it's my job to support you and help remove obstacles. So I'm not judging you for being like, for having a lack of capacity. Um,
We're legitimately trying to help.
right. I just want to know where you are. And so I can tell what's keeping you stuck.
Yeah.
And he's like getting upset. And I was like, it sounds to me like you're judging yourself and then putting that blame on me.
And that was the big one is that he's like, oh, yeah.
Yeah. And I said, hey man, you don't have to be so hard on yourself. Like we're here to help. We're not just trying to like, thumb our noses at you and grind you into dust. Like
Right?
we want to know where you're coming from, and we want to get to know you. He said, well, I said, why do I have you write these journals? And he's like, I don't know. And I was like, so that you know your own mind, and also so that you have this practice of clarifying your thoughts. I've been journaling for years. I've got books and books and books of journals, you know?
Yeah.
And I want to start them on this process so they can start to understand themselves. And I don't have to pay for fucking therapy because they've already written this stuff out, right? They've been doing deep work since been pimping.
They're
So
like,
if
we're
they,
good. We got it.
what's up?
They're like, we're good. We got it.
Right. And this is one of those things, right? When like it's become like it's become like a white woman thing. Is like white girls want to tell you that you need therapy all the time.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
It's like, have you done the work? Have you been to therapy?
I was
As if
literally
like,
just going to say, have you done the work is like a favorite thing.
right, right. That's
Yeah.
like, and it's like, it sounds like you're projecting. That's that's my response at this point is it's like, oh, it sounds to me like you have found something that you don't particularly care for, and you've decided that I need to do work on myself because you don't like me. You know?
I
So,
mean,
right?
yeah, I
And
guess it's
this
one approach.
this is a thing, right? So imagine that people's comments are like, thumbs up and thumbs down, right? Somebody is giving you a CSAT score, customer satisfaction. So
Right.
you can have positive, neutral, or negative. And anytime someone says that something that is critical, okay, that's a thumbs down. Anything time somebody gives you a compliment, that's positive. That's a thumbs up. Cool. Okay. Well, um, what do you do with negative reviews? Most people, they're just like, I'm mad. You're insulting me. Bah! Right? But what does a company, what does an organization do when they receive negative feedback? They like, say, oh, okay, cool. We'll categorize this as a case type and a reason code. And then we'll
And
like,
this will investigate and like explore, is this issue specifically to a preference that you, the person, has, or is something going on our end that we can adjust to make improvements for a lot of people?
right, like, am I getting this feedback a lot? right?
Yeah.
And so we'll say, okay, well, what is the most common negative comment that we receive? And then we'll go and look at that and say, oh, okay, is this corresponding to customer service issue? Is this a product issue? Is it that they just aren't our target customer and, they're only dealing with us because, they don't have a better alternative? Like that's the way now I'm looking at any sort of negative comments that people say to me. I've had a hot button for condescension and insults, um, a lot. And so I'm now looking at this and saying, okay, how do I help my kid deal with judgment, right?
Mhm.
And a judgment again is an opinion, but the thing is, sometimes the judgment actually can impact you, right? If you get enough negative feedback and you don't fix your product, then people stop buying your shit,
Right?
right? So, when somebody says, "Oh, don't care what other people think," that's not entirely true. Um, you just need to figure out how much weight should you put on what other people think.
Yeah, totally.
And so all of this comes back to, you know, he feels bad because he doesn't want to break the rules. And he feels like he's constantly breaking the rules by not knowing, like, you know, well, I did what you told me to within the narrow confines of the rules. You told me to, write beginning, middle, and end of my day, and then thoughts, actions, and feelings. And I did that, and it's not good enough. And so, I didn't abide by the rules. And now he's beating himself up because he didn't do the rule right. And I'm like, bro, we don't have, like, and I said, do we have a lot of rules at this house? And he's like, well, no. And I said, that's right. What
Yeah.
we have instead are principles because I'm not a very good rule follower. I never really have been. But what I have always been is principled. Even when my code wasn't great, my principles I've got literally tattooed on my face, right?
You do.
And so I said, what I want you to do is I want you not to just be a rule follower. I want you to live a principled life where you can make decisions, effective decisions about what you do, about what actions you take based on your guiding principles, not just based on what the rules say. Because, you know, this is actually how the business world works. This is how the real world works is that if you are following rules, you are subject to those rules. Ooh,
Oh, snap.
ooh. And if you're subject to the rules, then that means somebody commands you. Now, I'm not saying don't have the rule of law, but think about it. Why do we have laws?
Uh, Promote baseline order.
Promote baseline order. Yeah. Who needs to be ordered to follow those rules?
I don't know how to answer that because I do think it's to promote baseline order. And I also think it's the larger a society gets, the more people you're dealing with, the more important it is to have a baseline standard that we expect everybody to abide by.
Okay. So baseline standard, I like that, for everybody to abide by. Um, okay. Do
I
you
think it's
remember? Do you remember
designed
our
to prevent chaos.
to prevent chaos? Okay, but here's the thing: why would we have the chaos in the first place?
Because if actions don't have any consequences, then chaos ensues.
Okay, but that means that the consequences have to be externally driven rather than intrinsic motivations. Rules are a form of extrinsic motivations. So why do we need extrinsic motivations?
Hmm, why do we need extrinsic motivations? Gosh, I would like to have some very deep philosophical, meaningful answer for this. I'm not sure because the part of me wants us not to need it, but I don't think that's real.
Yeah, okay, so that's actually a really good insight is that we want to not need it. But why do we need it? Because many people cannot efficiently or effectively govern themselves.
Mm,
So you need rules for people who are insufficient or inadequate to rule themselves. Yeah.
yep.
So when you look at, I mean, again, this is Kohlberg's three levels. So the first level of, and this is Kohlberg's morality scale, right? Level one is basically I do things to avoid pain, right? Level two is I do things because the authority figure told me to. That's rule of law.
Yep.
And then level three is I do things because they're just, right? I do the right thing because somebody will hurt me otherwise. I do the right thing because that's what the rules say. I do the right thing because it is just and principled. The reason we have the rule of law is because, well, Kohlberg says 80% is level one or two of the population. So only 20% of our population is principled
Why is that, do we think?
difficulty.
I was saying that a human nature thing? Because I feel like humans for longer than for most of human history, difficulty was the norm. So why are we not evolved to be more of a majority principled person if difficulty is the root?
So um, here's the rub. Principles are not all the same. So let's look at this in terms of feedback, right? If you are a hunter gatherer, your feedback of whether or not you eat today is like instant. I am hungry. If I don't get a deer or a rabbit or a squirrel or something, I will be hungry tonight and tomorrow,
Yep.
right? Feedback instantaneous.
Yep.
But for us, we have an abundance of food, right? Many of us, most of us at this point, we can go to the store and we can get more food than we need. And we don't actually have that same feedback mechanism saying, if you don't work, you will starve. So the layers between you and your feedback mechanism um, means that there's either a delay or you have essentially what's called moral hazard in economics, which is where you don't receive adverse consequences for bad behavior, so the bad behavior persists, right? So in a large society, what we have is a complexity issue. So the complexity issue says, we can't prevent all moral hazard because there will be layers between um, your actual outcomes or your actions in the feedback, right? So
Mhm.
we need to create a feedback mechanism that produces the type of behavior we want.
Mm.
So a principled person might say, I would like to feed and protect my family. And so I am hungry. My family is hungry. We will go and we will slaughter a cow. Well, that cow is on somebody else's land. That person has said, you can't have my cow. And so, well, He tried to come between me and my family, and so I murdered him, and then I took his cow. And now it was my cow, and I fed my family. Is that principled behavior?
My first instinct was no, because
Uh,
you are murdering in order to justify theft. Is it principled to seek creative ways to feed your family? Yes, but I don't know where the line is between harm to others and your own survival. Because obviously, in battlefield tactics, it's you or them.
uh-huh.
I would say it is principled to fight for your life.
So this is a conflict of principles. So here's the thing. This is where a lot of the like vegans, are, staunch on that principle. They're like, we don't want to kill anything. And so
Sure.
we're going to eat vegetables only, even though plants are still living things. We're going to eat, vegetables only, um, because we don't want to cause harm to anything with feelings.
Mhm.
Okay. Well, that is a principle, that they have chosen, um, in an effort to reduce harm. Well, anybody who eats meat is involved in the murder of something that didn't do anything to you, you know? So human beings are predators. Like that's it, man. We the apex predator of the planet,
Mhm.
right? And what has allowed us to become the apex predators on Earth is definitely not our physical strength. It is our ability to coordinate and build things. Yeah. And so by coordinating and building things such as farms, such as, practices that raise things so that we can eat them, right? You know, now we can kill something, without having to do a lot of effort, right? But then, again, is it principled to kill your neighbor? Probably not. So you do one principled thing, which is feed your family, but you did an unprincipled thing, which is murder your neighbor to do so. So this is the means and the end. How much do the means justify the ends? Right?
Mhm.
So, I mean, now we're having this conversation with a 12-year-old, right? And like it's about judgment and about the idea of how do you solve your problems, which is why I say virtue requires both fortitude and cognition, and that's why fewer and fewer people are principled. It's because the rule of law has become so stringent, right, that you know you follow these rules or else. And it's like, well, this person did something that I don't like. So I have to go to whoever makes the rules and ask them for permission or ask them to create laws or ask them, to enforce the laws to protect me. The principled person, however, has to be more thoughtful, more conscientious, more strategic.
Mhm.
And that's why most people don't do it. What was the book that we just that I played that clip for you? It's the He Who Fights with Monsters Lit RPG. I've been reading this. Thanks to Jake for turning me on to this. Now I've got Jim reading it, and he's like, "Oh, this is great," like so.
You're all reading it now.
And it's perfect because what Jim just finished reading Frankenstein. So
Oh,
from
fabulous.
monsters to He Who Fights with Monsters.
Different kind of, yeah, great, 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 great.
And the quote was, you know, this guy asks the question of one of his proteges, and he says, you know, what is he says, what's the difference or what's the opposite of good?
Right. And the
Eh,
guy says,
hold on. But then the protege says, I want to say evil, but I don't think that's the answer you're looking for.
mhm.
Go ahead.
No, you finish.
So what he says is the opposite of good is easy.
Oh,
That's why there are fewer principled people, because the opposite of good isn't bad. Like, it's not like people are just walking around with a desire for malevolence, right? Mostly what happens, and this is why we have crime. Crime is basically just the result of people who can't get their needs and wants met with conventional means.
mhm.
Yep.
Desperation.
Right. So if you can't get it, in a good way, and I think most people would prefer to do it in a way that doesn't like cause unnecessary harm unless they're bitter,
Sure.
right?
Yeah.
And if somebody's angry or bitter, then sure, they're going to revel in, the power fantasy of harming others, right? Or the
Mhm.
revenge of harming others. Um, or, if somebody has done this to me, then I'm going to do it back to you, you know.
Mhm.
So that kind of behavior is because they couldn't get the thing that they needed, or because they got judged, or because they felt some kind of way. And so people tend to turn to crime mostly when there is nothing stopping them, or when somebody has or when there's nothing stopping them, or when um the conventional means, the lawful means, are not otherwise available.
Mhm.
And, illegality is just a higher risk proposition.
Yep.
Yeah. I mean, we talked about this with gangsters, right? Gangsters are really good at contract enforcement. But this is why you have violence. This is why you have violence in like cartels and mafias and whatnot. It's because they can't go to a third party to enforce contracts. So violence becomes a contract enforcement mechanism. If you're known for being particularly brutal, then nobody wants to breach a contract with you,
Mhm.
you know and so you have to periodically make examples of people, for this is what happens if you breach contract. And now you have a reputation for effective contract enforcement, and so people make deals with you. And if you both can, make deals where you deliver on your side of the bargain, then you don't have any reason for violence. And that's how you generate alliances. And this is actually just, you know, how contracts were handled before law.
Hmm.
Yeah. It's with violence. And so it's like strategy. If you can't get the thing that you need, then you just have to be creative about it, and you use what resources you have at your disposal. And in civilization, what we've done is we have put a kibosh on violence. But then there's a
One
phrase,
more.
right?
Go ahead. Is the
That
phrase?
an armed society is a polite society,
Mhm.
right? So, you know, if you want to have people treat each other well, um, give everybody the ability to enforce their own boundaries. Ooh, yeah.
Mhm.
But what you struggle with there is, again, unprincipled people. If you have someone who cannot control themselves, then why would you give them a weapon?
Seriously.
Yo. So, this is why self control is one of the primary functions of responsible parenthood. And so when you have parents who aren't teaching their kids self control, self reliance, self governance, um, that's where you have, you know, kids who struggle, right? Those are the kids who need the most therapy because they're not getting the relationships, and the lessons at home.
Mhm.
So
Accurate.
this goes into abundance versus scarcity, right? So people talk about these things as mindsets, right? Oh, you just have a scarcity mindset, you know. Fuck out of here. Some people have scarce resources, right? Like I don't just
Okay.
have an infinite amount of money and then they'll be like, "No, it's the secret." And it's like, it's what? It's like, no, no, no. You just have to think that it exists in the world somewhere and it's yours. And if like imagine it flowing into you, then it will. And then you'll be in abundance.
You just have to like manifest it, juju it into reality.
Manifest it, right?
Yep. Mhm.
Okay, look, I'm a witch doctor and I have a mojo, it's a podcast called Mojo. All right.
Right?
But I'm gonna science the shit out of that.
Hmm.
Abundance mindset, right, is mostly creating self-fulfilling prophecies. It's like that phenomenon where you buy a new car and now you see them everywhere on the road. It's because
Hmm.
now you have created a peg in your mind to go and find that thing. And this is what I told my mentee earlier today is he's like, man, how do you work from home and still get stuff done? And I was just like, I just showed you all of my systems for how I manage my time. And he was like, yeah, but like I get so distracted. And I was like, the only reason that you're distracted is if you remember nothing from our talk today, remember that if you don't give something a home, it will just vanish. It'll be homeless and disappear,
Hmm.
right? If you
Yep.
don't tell your money where to go from your paycheck, then you'll just spend that on whatever the fuck you feel
Yep.
like, right? So if you don't give your attention someplace to be, then your attention will just go wherever the fuck your feelings want it to.
Hmm.
Or, like whatever somebody comes up and gives you, they're like, hey, pay attention to this. And then you're like, okay, because you weren't paying attention to something else that was more important.
Yep.
So the abundant person has to have something to focus on. Yeah. Scarcity just means that you're in a deficit. You have a limited capacity, right? He said, how
Hmm.
do you avoid burnout? I said, burnout is just a shortage of capacity. If you give yourself a buffer, you don't get burned out. It's like going to the gym. You don't just train every single day and don't sleep. That's
Hmm.
dumb because then your muscles don't have any time to repair themselves,
Yep.
right? So, abundance just means that you have a surplus of resources or an excess of capacity. And so when your resources are scarce, then you have to optimize. And when your resources are abundant, then you have to prioritize. And because the natural state of most humans, most creatures on this earth is scarcity, we struggle with prioritization because we're unaccustomed to it.
Hmm. Yep.
I mean, this is why lottery winners go broke, is they've never learned to prioritize. They've just learned to optimize. And when they don't have to optimize, they just spend all their money on bullshit.
Right. Yep.
Yeah.
Just go out on a spree.
And so, in the absence of principles, you don't know how to effectively weight your options.
Real talk.
Yeah. So, understanding your resource constraints will fuel your happiness, which is what I really wanted to talk about because that was what I mean, like we took the long way to get here, right? Principles and versus rules. And I'm a proponent of rules only being like training wheels to get you to have good principles, right? But then he was like, "Oh, well, I want to do something that makes me happy, mentee." And I said, Psh, happiness is stupid. Fuck happiness, right?
Ah,
And it's not really that happiness is dumb, but I don't think people understand what happiness is, right? People are like, "Oh, no, no, then maybe you mean joy." Okay. Well, maybe
the
you mean
thing,
fulfillment.
they mean is I have a good feeling.
Got a real good feeling, won't hit no ceiling, like
Mhm.
there is lightning deep in my bones.
Just like that. Yeah.
Yep. So if you want lightning deep in your bones, okay, here's the rub. People say, okay, well, just choose to be happy. I fucking hate that one the most. Choose to be happy. Fuck out of here. Right? So what that really means is be delusional and lie to yourself and sit in a room where you're, in pain or by yourself or lonely or grieving or poor or whatever and just be like, everything is great.
I'm choosing happiness. I
Right?
agree with you about the choosing thing. We have had a conversation before about the definition of positivity because
Yeah.
I also believe in a positive attitude. And that is both a mechanism that works for me internally to keep me propelled forward even when things are bad. It's not that
Hmm.
I'm choosing to ignore my circumstances and deluding myself into thinking everything is great and I'm happy. I'm very aware when things are stressful, but a positive outlook is something that works for me as internal motivation. And it's also a form of respect for those around me. My positive attitude is something I am doing to be respectful of others.
Yes. And actually, when we broke it down, what we actually came to was you define positive attitude as two things: optimism, right? Which is not looking at things as better or worse, but like saying, here's the optimal outcome and let me aim for that, right? Here's what I want to happen and let's make that the goal. So optimism, yes. And then the other one is, like you said, respecting other people. That's basically not taking your bad day or your bad feelings out on other people.
Mhm.
And that's what you consider a positive attitude. And I'm like, I can get behind that 100%. I don't think that there's anything wrong because I don't necessarily have a positive attitude, even though I am optimistic. I basically look at the entire spectrum, right? What's the worst case? What's the best case? What's the base case, right? What's the most likely? And I will set the optimistic target, but, if the most realistic case is not that, then I can work to improve the probability that my best case scenario becomes the reality. Like I can be creative to get closer to that. But I don't feel great about it all the time, you know? And I don't want to necessarily like yell at somebody because I'm in a foul mood. But at the same time, what is that? It's generally speaking a capacity issue. I've allowed myself to overextend my capacity because when I'm not overly stressed out, when I'm not, redlining, I'm actually quite funny. You know, I'm quite pleasant to be around. And that's what gets us to the final thing, which was Marty Seligman in Flourishing. Actually, this isn't quite the final thing. Let's before we get into Marty Seligman and Flourishing, it's flow. What most people actually mean, I think, by happiness is, what do we say? We said that there's three ultimate motivations that people have. They want like money or status or experiences. And by money, it's not just money, it's like resource, whatever resource, increase resource, in acquisition and decrease costs, right?
Mhm.
For status, it's basically like increase my allies number and quality, and then decrease my enemies number and harmfulness, right? So I want people to be more helpful and less harmful, right? And then with experiences, it's like I want to decrease friction, right? Decrease pain and increase fun, increase pleasure. So those three things are basically driving most people's decisions.
Mhm.
How do I get more resources, have less pain and more pleasure, and have more friends than enemies,
Yep.
right? So what that actually corresponds to, on the experience side anyway, is flow, right? And I call this stress, flow, and slack, right? Those are the three zones. So if you're in stress, that means that the challenge that you're facing is greater than your present ability, right? Or it's like really taxing your ability. If you think about this as an equivalence for like heart rate zones, right? Zone two is like your aerobic base. You can basically stay in zone two, have a conversation, and keep that up for a pretty long time, right? Zone three and four are where you're like building your athleticism and you can sustain those, but generally for a shorter period of time. And then zone five is like sprinting, like anabolic. You can only do it like you can max your sprint for like a minute,
Mhm.
and then you're just like gassed, right?
Mhm.
Unless you're an 800-meter runner, which are fucking crazy people. I don't know how you consider that to be a sprint. Good
It's
Lord.
bonkers.
I max out at 200 meters. So um, if I can't outrun you in 200 meters, we fighting. that's that's basically it. If you can out sprint me for 200 meters, which even at this age is no easy feat. If you can out sprint me for 200 meters, you deserve to get away. you know?
Godspeed. You've earned it.
So flow state then is, where it's not so stressful that, your eyes are bleeding and steam is coming out of your ears, but it's not so boring that you want to stab yourself in the eye with a pencil,
Yeah.
right? Graphic imagery for a family podcast,
Mhm.
right? Why am I the most aggressive family podcast?
Good for
Um,
you.
so that's what most people are actually aiming for. They're aiming for flow state. But here's the crazy thing. If you want that flow experience, well, then basically you just need to find something that's at a commensurate difficulty level to your ability. Woo.
Hey.
The next part, though, if you're going not just for like positive feelings or a feeling of ease or a good experience and you want genuinely like happiness, what you're not necessarily looking for is just pure pleasure. What you're actually looking for is what Marty Seligman calls flourishing. And the acronym he uses, this one isn't mine, is PERMA, but my version is MERP. So
Oh my
PERMA.
God. Literally in unison with my going mirror this moment.
Oh my God. Ah!
Anyway, keep
Okay.
continuing.
So PERMA is positive emotions, engagement, meaning, relationships, and achievements. And if you have those four things squared away, you will experience positivity, right?
Yeah.
But here's the interesting thing. And I haven't read that book in a while. But and also he wrote another book I think called Learned Happiness, which I thought was great. Play on like learned helplessness.
Well, that's
Um,
fine.
but what it actually ends up being is because I like to disaggregate problems or identify drivers. Um, well, what is the thing that actually causes happiness? It's not the search of positive emotions themselves, because that's how you get them through the delusional route, right? We talked about where your point of view versus empirical reality, and it's like if you decide that you want to have positive emotions regardless of what your empirical reality is, then you're kind of like in the realm of delusion,
Mhm.
unless you are essentially looking at yourself from a contrast and say, okay, my life before, I was like broke and like struggling financially, and everybody hated me, and like, like I was bullied, like, like I look at the worst place that I've ever been compared to where I am now, and by contrast, oh man, that place was really fucking terrible. But now, you know why
Things are
should I
better.
complain? I got like, a nice job, like we did our health insurance, like we did our insurance benefits, and I was just like, wow, great job, HR
Great
department,
insurance.
a
Yeah.
okay. Uh, so, like, why am I complaining? Because we've both been completely without health insurance, and it fucking sucks. And I still struggle to go to the doctor because I'm like, I don't know how much it's going to cost me, even though I could totally go, and like, it's not going to cost me much. My copay is going
And
to
it
be like
may,
$20. Like,
right?
I'm
It may not
good.
cost you anything.
you know so I'm in now a position where I can be that, but my old self, my former self, was not in that kind of position. So if I contrast, man, I should feel great because I'm not in that place where I was,
Mhm.
right? But I don't feel great because I have a goal of where I want to be, and compared to where I want to be, I am still grossly insufficient. So, where do you draw the line between, do I want to just feel good because I'm not where I was? Or do I want to have a driver to propel me to where I want to be?
Why can't you feel good and have a driver?
I can feel good about where I've come from, but I don't want to feel good about where I haven't achieved yet because I want that pull motivation. So, what I'm doing is I'm creating both a push and a pull,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
And the push is, I'm not satisfied with where I am currently, present state. And there is a greater, more advantageous state that I would like to be in the future. And as long as that goal is pulling me towards it, now we get to MIRP. So M is your meaning. And these things work in a chain. So if you just focus on happiness, you're actually more likely to get unhappiness if you focus on it. Because what it'll do is it'll make you think more in your default mode and then use experience as your standard of evidence. So your default mode is good for me now, which means that you're going to spend more than you invest. Ooh. Meanwhile, if you look at your um uh oh my god, where was I going with this? Oh, if you look at happiness, right, as your goal, it tends to make you think about what's good for me now. And what's that other saying? Hard choices, easy life, easy choices, hard life.
Mhm.
That's where we're at, right? And so I'm going to make the easy choice now to get what I want now. But because I'm not investing, I don't have any surplus, and my surplus doesn't compound. And because my surplus doesn't compound, I'm just constantly eating my my gains,
Mhm.
right? That's like working out and not recovering,
Yep.
right? So that's why generally focusing on happiness doesn't actually produce happiness. What actually produces happiness though is MERP. Focus on meaning. And now I have something that is purposeful. And the more benefit it has to the more people, the better. Good for me and good for others, and long term. And
Mhm.
the bigger that goal is, the more infinite that game is for the Simon Sinek, book. The more infinite the game, the more purposeful, or the more wise, the more reasons you have for that purpose, right? That meaning, the more engaged you become. That's the E. The more engaged you become with the activity, with the driving towards those ends. And the more you drive towards those ends, And the more you engage and solve problems, the more you achieve. And the more you achieve, well, when you have a bunch of resources, right, that come from your achievements because you have been useful, you build better relationships because you're now able to make win-win trades and to donate, to gift, to invest. And those things create better quality relationships. When you have a relationship where you've gone in to give and not just to get, and that creates positive emotions because I've got cool shit. I've got a purpose in life. Well, I got a purpose in life, which has given me an intrinsic motivation to achieve things, which has gotten me relationships, which has made me feel fucking positive.
Amazing.
So focus on meaning and you will get happiness. Focus on happiness and you will get a whole lot of shit.
Yeah.
Happiness is a byproduct of meaning.
Beautiful. Beautiful.
Woo.
So yeah, go figure out your meaning.
And this is what we talked about last at our last session with my mentee, is we talked about ikigai, which is you love it, you're good at it, the world needs it, you get paid for it. And if you can get all four of those, then you're going to be in a great spot because that's also the recipe for flow state. And MERP, you're going to be flowing in your MERPs,
Ah, amazing.
right?
Yay.
And, you know, I've only ever been able to achieve 3 out of 4 um, with my ikigai. And so, to your point, I don't feel great about my achievement because it's not flow state. So my experiences tend to be really uncomfortable because my skills are inadequate to the tasks in front of me. And again, we don't always have the luxury of choosing how much to put on our plate.
Hmm.
You know, I know that I can only accomplish so many things in a day, but I'm also really looking out for my future self, right? If discipline is being of service to my future self, then I want to do the thing that will have the most far reaching benefit for me, not just tomorrow, not just next week, but next year, right? What are the practices that I can start today that will make my life better tomorrow, right?
Hmm.
And what I realize is, man, there's a lot of stuff that I still need to learn. There's a lot of skills that I need to build. You know, we're running a marketing campaign, and I'm like, oh God, I feel like I haven't run a marketing campaign in years, or I haven't done it in like this digital landscape before. So now I'm like, holy shit, this is going to be fun, but also nerve wracking, but also like I'm about to learn a shit ton.
Hmm.
And I'm, and I care about the stakes,
Hmm.
you know? I'd like to see a positive return on my marketing, but if I don't, I'm not gonna lie, I'm probably gonna be pissed off because I'm putting in this effort.
I'm sure you will be, but you'll also learn a lot and then you'll vent and you'll try again with the new information that you've learned from your first go.
Right. And that's what you told me the other day about your business is that, you know, you were like, well, I'm putting in all of this effort, but I'm not getting the impact that I want. And I said, okay, so what does that mean? That means that you just need to put that same effort towards the more impactful actions.
Mhm.
Yeah. Yep. Okay. You
Okay.
got anything else?
No, that's a great place to leave it.
All right.
All right.
Ignice.
Big case.